One word could destroy your honor and sentence you to death among Vikings, ARGR. Being labeled unmanly meant becoming UTLAGR, an outlaw hunted like a wolf in the forest. Anyone could kill you without legal consequences, claiming your possessions as reward. What really happened to these men banished to die in the frozen wilderness? What if a single word could destroy your honor, strip away your legal rights, and condemn you to a fate worse than death? Among the Norse, that word was ARGR, a term so devastating, so loaded with contempt, that being labeled with it meant complete social destruction. In Viking society, being masculine wasn't just a cultural expectation. It formed the core of someone's legal, social, and spiritual position. Being ARGR, roughly translated as unmanly, feminine, or morally deviant, wasn't just an insult. It was a formal accusation. And in Norse law books like the Icelandic Gragas, it had devastating consequences. The term suggested behaviors that went directly against Norse masculine ideals. Cowardice, taking socially passive roles in same-sex relationships, or using magic called seidur. While women practiced this magic widely, it was considered shameful and unmanly for men. According to Snorri Sturluson, even the god Odin was criticized in the Ynglinga saga for using seidur. The text remarked that it was so unmanly that men could not practice it without shame. Calling a man ARGR was no surface-level insult. It was a legally enforceable accusation known as a SND. This was a deeply dishonorable insult. If the accusation was challenged, the accused had to defend his masculinity with holmgang, a ritual duel. Not responding was seen as admitting guilt. And the consequences were severe. In Norse law, particularly in Iceland during the 10th and 11th centuries, an unchallenged ARGR accusation could lead to complete outlawry. This was the harshest form of legal punishment. This wasn't just banishment, it was a death sentence pronounced by society itself. The accused would lose all protection under the law and become fair game for anyone who wanted to kill them without consequences. The shame reached beyond the individual. It could stain someone's entire bloodline. Families would distance themselves from accused ergi-men, fearing contamination by association. These men were considered morally contaminated, corrupted in their soul, and unfit to live among honorable warriors. In Viking culture, masculinity was sacred, and the label ARGR didn't just mean shame, it meant destruction. Skogangur meant being sent into the forest to die. In Viking law, few punishments were as ruthless as skogangur, which literally means going into the forest. But this wasn't poetic banishment, it was a calculated form of social and legal execution. Being sentenced to skogangur meant complete removal from the human world, stripped of rights, stripped of kinship, and left to die outside the boundaries of society. This punishment, recorded in the Gragas, the medieval Icelandic law book, was reserved for the most serious violations. Manslaughter without compensation, sorcery, and as we've seen, being considered ARGR if the charge wasn't defended. It made a man UTLAGR, an outlaw. Outlawry came in two forms. Lesser outlawry called Fjorbagsgarder, which lasted 3 years, and full outlawry, skogangur, which was permanent. The first allowed a man to return after his punishment, as long as he committed no crimes in exile. The latter offered no such mercy. A man sentenced to skogangur had to leave all settlements and inhabited areas. He was denied shelter in any household and forbidden to receive help from family or friends. He had no right to shelter, food, fire, or protection. Neither could he trade or interact with society in any way. If he tried to return or was caught within civilized boundaries, anyone could kill him without legal consequences. He couldn't attend festivals, make offerings, or seek justice. He had become Nidingur, a dishonorable man, stripped of drengskaper, the Norse concept of honorable masculinity. The sagas offer a haunting glimpse of this punishment. In Grettir's saga, the outlaw Grettir Asmundarsson is condemned to the wilderness where he survives for years in harsh isolation. His fate becomes a slow dissolution of mind, of body, of soul. Few survived long in this condition. The Norse landscape was harsh, dense forests, merciless winters, and wild predators. But greater than the physical dangers was the burden of being forgotten. No rituals would be performed for such a man, no songs sung. He was dead before his body died. Outlawed meant hunted by everyone, protected by no one. For the Vikings, masculinity was sacred, defined by strength, honor, and the ability to use violence when necessary. But what happened to those men who received the label ARGR, unmanly? The answer was chilling. They were outlawed, banished from human society, and made into something less than men. Something to be hunted. These men were now legally utlager, outside the law. They weren't imprisoned. They weren't rehabilitated. They were exposed, vulnerable, and openly marked for death. What made this punishment so horrifying wasn't just the legal designation. It was the deliberate, ritualized dismantling of someone's humanity. A supposedly unmanly man had no right to a home, family, or legacy. He became, in the words of Norse law, like a wolf in the forest. A beast without name or protection. Killing him was no crime. It was often considered a civic duty. The laws were explicit. Anyone could kill an outlaw. Not only was the killer free from legal consequences, but in some cases he could also claim the dead man's possessions. The law stated clearly, whoever kills an outlaw need pay no weregild. For those branded as ARGR, the moral burden weighed even heavier. Their alleged unmanliness, whether practicing sorcery, taking a socially passive role in same-sex relationships, or violating gender norms, was seen as pollution of the social order. They posed a threat to the ideal of Norse masculinity and had to be eliminated, not merely removed. Erased from the bloodline meant forgotten by family and clan. Among the Vikings, identity wasn't personal. It was ancestral. A man's worth came not only from his deeds, but also from his place within his clan, his lineage, and his honorable family ties. Being called ARGR, unmanly, wasn't just social shame, it threatened to sever these bonds forever. Those who bore the mark of ARGR, whether through accusation or outlawry, often suffered a fate that reached far beyond death. They were deliberately erased from the memory of their own blood. Unlike a fallen warrior whose name lived on in sagas and stones, the Nidingur, the dishonored man, remained unspoken. Not accidentally forgotten, but purposely forgotten. In Norse culture, memory was inheritance. Families proudly recited their ancestors and traced noble bloodlines through generations. But when a man was accused of unmanly behavior, especially if the accusation remained unchallenged, his name was often omitted from genealogies. Icelandic genealogical texts and family sagas frequently leave out or shorten the descent of such figures. This reflects a social process of deliberate erasure. This wasn't just from shame, it was self-preservation. Descending from a man tainted with need brought dishonor over the entire family. It could affect marriage prospects, inheritance rights, and position in Norse assemblies. To protect future generations, families would deny, disown, and eventually deny the existence of the fallen man. For Vikings, being considered unmanly could lead not only to banishment or death, but also to complete erasure from family, history, and legacy. A man once bound by honor could become a ghost of his own blood, remembered by no one and mourned by no one. Condemning men as ARGR revealed the Norse drive to guard honor through banishment, outlawry, and forgetfulness. Masculinity forged in cold iron, that judgment echoes when societies decide who deserves protection and who may be cast out. Legends and laws still shape gender, justice, and memory. What modern norms reflect the Viking fear of unmanliness? Respond below with your reflections. As the Havamal warns, cattle die and kinsmen die, and so does one die oneself. But a noble name will never die if one gains good renown.